Two of the most influential authors of the 20th century were J.R.R. Tolkien and Frank Herbert. These two men came to define two different but popular literary genres. Tolkien's magnum opus trilogy, The Lord of the Rings, released between 1954 to 1955, became the foundation of nearly all modern fantasy, while Frank Herbert's magnum opus, Dune, released in 1965, became an extremely influential foundational work within science fiction, is credited as the best-selling sci-fi novel of all time, and also spawned 5 sequels. Tolkien's Legendarium is based in a mythical past of Earth, while Herbert's Dune universe is based 20,000 years in humanity's future. Dune was born out of Herbert's love and intrigue for certain ecological and political ideas. He was trying to understand the real world and all of its complexities by looking at cosmological and imminent evolutionary truths of the universe and how this shapes human behaviour and human societies in the past, present, and future. Overall, Herbert can be seen as doing epic fantasy within a science fiction setting combined with political realism. Lord of the Rings was born out of Tolkien's fascination with mythology and languages, with Tolkien creating high mythological fantasy which explored transcendental and universal truths of the human soul with an emphasis on idealistic escapism. Even though both authors were working in two different genres, both series have been compared with each other in the past. Dune and The Lord of the Rings are like cousins due to the importance each work carries. Arthur C. Clarke once said that he knew nothing comparable to Dune except Lord of the Rings. Numerous people have also compared the upcoming Dune 2021 movie by Denis Villeneuve as this generation's sci-fi cinematic version of The Lord of the Rings. Most people would see no connection between these two influential authors, but a surprising fact that many people are unaware of is that Tolkien actually read Dune shortly after it was first published in 1965, and it's only recently we have learned what his thought and opinion was of the epic sci-fi book. This can be seen in two previously unpublished letters. The first letter, written by J.R.R. Tolkien, where he mentions Dune, was directed to the American science fiction author and sculptor Sterling Lanier. Lanier is best remembered as the editor who championed the publication of Frank Herbert's best-selling novel Dune while he worked at Chilton Books. It's likely that without him, it's possible Dune would never have came to prominence. The first letter reads, "Dear Mr. Lanier, I received your book Dune just before I went abroad for a short while, hence the delay in acknowledging it. I don't think I shall have time to read it until I get a next holiday." The second letter was written nearly 6 months later, and it was directed to a man named John Bush, as it reads, "Thank you for sending me a copy of Dune. I received one last year from Lanier and so already know something about the book. It is impossible for an author still writing to be fair to another author working along the same lines. At least I find it so. In fact, I dislike Dune with some intensity, and in that unfortunate case, it is much the best and fairest to another author to keep silent and refuse to comment. Would you like me to return the book as I already have one, or to hand it on?" This letter makes it clear what Tolkien's opinion was. This raises the question, why did Tolkien dislike Dune with such intensity? Now, of course, we can never know what the answer is for certain, since Tolkien passed away in 1973, but we can make educated guesses based on the beliefs and goals of each author and the structure of each of their work. I also want to point out, this video is not attacking either The Lord of the Rings or Dune as being bad works of fiction, and it's certainly not attacking either Herbert or Tolkien as bad individuals or writers. I personally love both works. It's just simply a video that is using some speculation on an interesting topic to potentially answer this question by highlighting important differences between both influential works and the worldviews and goals of each author. The first possible reason why Tolkien didn't like Dune could be something to do with the languages and the writing style of Frank Herbert in Dune. Tolkien was a professor of English literature and language at Oxford University. He was a trained philologist and polyglot who had learned multiple languages such as English, Middle English, Latin, Greek, German, French, Spanish, Italian, Welsh, Finnish, and also specialised in Old Germanic languages including Old Norse, Old Icelandic, and Old English. He also constructed the grammar and vocabulary of at least 15 languages and dialects in his fantastical worlds. Style was not exactly Herbert's strong point. In my opinion though, he's not a bad writer, but you don't exactly read Dune for the beauty of the prose. Tolkien, however, plays with language endlessly. It was his lifelong obsession, and there's extraordinary sound to his prose. Herbert has references to multiple languages in his universe, such as Chakbosa, but it is quite evident that of a non-linguist. Also, Frank Herbert's writing style can be very off-putting to a lot of people because of his lack of description. Herbert leaves much to the imagination and makes you read between the lines. For example, much of the detail about the nature of the Galactic Imperium and how it truly functions is not provided initially in the series. Active reading is necessary if you want to pick up on the deep and subtle details that are embedded within the series and how numerous individuals, planets, organisations and factions are interconnected with one another. Herbert also has a great deal of exposition, but it occurs in conversations and over the course of many chapters. Tolkien, in contrast to Herbert, is much more direct and writes line after line, paragraph after paragraph, and page after page of description. It is his imagination that fills the pages with very few blanks. Readers don't necessarily have to read between the lines with Tolkien. If the detail is not on the page, it almost certainly will be in the appendix. A second reason why Tolkien possibly disliked Dune is over the issue of Allegory. Tolkien made it clear that he wasn't a fan of Allegory, once stating, "I cordially dislike Allegory in all of its manifestations and always have done so since I grew old and wary enough to detect its presence. I much prefer history, true or feigned, with its varied applicability to the thought and experience of the readers. I think that many confuse applicability with allegory, but the one resides in the freedom of the reader and the other in the purposed domination of the author. In contrast, Dune is a novel which is full of allegories and analogies. For example, the most valuable substance within the Dune universe is spice melange, and the spice is an allegory of oil in our world. Also, Dune can be seen as Lawrence of Arabia, but in space. Frank Herbert, through his story, is also trying to explore multiple themes and deconstruct certain ideas, such as the hero's journey. He is trying to teach us things about the cycles of violence through human history, the horrible truth about how power structures work and how they intersect with other institutions, and the dangers of a messianic heroic figure leading mankind. Tolkien isn't necessarily trying to persuade you of anything and is more interested in fairy tales and stories for their own sake. He's trying to free your spirit by giving it a respite from the brutal nature of the world by transporting it into an epic and fantastical hinterland of abstraction. His works certainly have themes and perspectives that he expresses consciously and unconsciously, but he isn't writing Lord of the Rings in order to necessarily persuade you of a specific lesson. The third possible reason why Tolkien didn't like Dune could be related to the nature of the portrayal of characters within this universe. The characters within the Dune universe can appear to be very unrelatable to many readers. Tolkien created more human characters that we are able to easily empathise with. Frank Herbert was interested in the potentiality of mankind in the future, all the possible ways in which we could evolve and even possibly transcend our humanity. He's not necessarily interested in humanity as it is currently now. Even the main character of the first book, Paul Atreides, becomes very hard to relate to once his powers start to be unlocked. Herbert was also interested in not just our biological and mental evolution, but also the evolution of our political, economic, military, religious, and sociological institutions. Herbert thinks in terms of evolution of the human race over vast spans of time. He looks at history like a general looking over a battlefield. This is why thousands of years can pass between books in this saga. Psychoanalytical analysis, the philosophy, and the themes are what are the most important aspects of the Dune saga, not the narrative or the individual characters. Many of the characters in Dune can feel like literal walking archetypes and themes rather than flesh and blood human beings. While Tolkien seemed to be much more interested in humanity as it is now and our struggles, the commitment to being virtuous, the joys of a simple and peaceful life, and he focused much more on the everyman, he does have epic, powerful characters like Gandalf, Galadriel, Aragorn, and others in his story. But his story is also filled with the everyman and ordinary beings such as the hobbits of the Shire and the overwhelming love, loyalty, and friendship that exists between the members of the Fellowship. Tolkien's world is a huge, heavy detailed high fantasy epic filled with great characters, but at the same time it's the story of a little hobbit named Frodo Baggins who has an enormous impact on a huge world that is foreign to him. He isn't necessarily preordained for greatness. While Herbert's Dune is filled with superhuman characters who exert their will on the universe to achieve more power rather than ordinary beings. These superhuman characters include the manipulating space witches of the Bene Gesserit, the mutated navigators of the Spacing Guild, the biological human-computer mentats, the Herculean fighters and warriors such as the Fremen and Sardaukar, the cruel and decadent Harkonnens, and of course the Kwisatz Haderach himself. Overall, Herbert focuses more on how the small actions of the powerful can influence humanity as a whole, while Tolkien focuses on how the small and moral actions of the littlest people can change the outcomes of history. The final reason why Tolkien might have disliked Dune with some intensity is with the way the story handles religion, morality, and mythology. Tolkien was a devout traditionalist Roman Catholic. His religious faith meant a lot to him. He was instrumental in converting his friend C.S. Lewis back to Christianity and even made his wife convert to Catholicism before he would marry her. Frank Herbert himself was raised as a Catholic but later in life converted to Zen Buddhism. In the Dune universe, all of the old religions of Earth have evolved and mixed with one another, and seemingly following within the syncretic perennialist school of thought. This includes old religions like Roman Catholicism, Protestantism, Sunni Islam, Zen Buddhism, and many others. The main ecumenical text in the Dune universe is the Orange Catholic Bible. The orange in Orange Catholic Bible most likely refers to the Orange Institution, a Protestant Christian movement that was often at odds with the Roman Catholic Church. This will have almost certainly have irritated or grated on Tolkien. In the last years of his life, Tolkien resisted some of the liturgical changes implemented after the Second Vatican Council, especially the use of English for the liturgy. He was so angered by this that he continued to make the responses in Latin, ignoring the rest of the congregation. If this change angered Tolkien, then the thought of Roman Catholic doctrine mixing with Protestantism would have most likely annoyed him as well, and the further thought that Catholic theology would also mix and compromise with foreign religions such as Islam and Buddhism would almost certainly have horrified and repelled him greatly. The Dune saga also shows how religion and mythology can be cynically used by the powerful as a tool of social control and social engineering. The religious institutions and mythological stories in this universe are shown to be used as a weapon of manipulation by the strong against the weak. The perfect example of this in the first Dune book is with the Bene Gesserit Sisterhood and their Missionara Protectiva. This was the Sisterhood's black arm of superstition, was responsible for sowing seeds of superstitions, prophecies, myths and legends amongst primitive cultures and societies. This was done so that the Sisterhood could take advantage of these people and exploit them in the future, ensuring their dominance over them. The Bene Gesserit even manipulate bloodlines in the attempt to create a super being in which they can use to achieve power. They also view love as a weakness at best and a wretched disease at worst. Breeding children is just a scheme to achieve an evolutionary desirable outcome and not something to be done out of love. Publicly, they allow themselves to be seen as a religious order, but this is all smoke and mirrors. Their primary interest is politics, and religion and breeding are nothing but tools to achieve victory in the political sphere. As discussed earlier, Tolkien was a devout Roman Catholic and probably did not enjoy this aspect of the book. Tolkien also believed that mythology revealed objective truths about the universe. This can be seen in a poem he wrote, titled Mythopoeia. This poem was written in response to his friend C.S. Lewis, who once said that myths were lies breathed through silver. Tolkien viciously attacked this position and argued vigorously in favour of the position that mythology contains spiritual and foundational truths, while myth-making is a creative act that helps us to reveal these truths. In this poem, the creative human authors are referred to as little makers, who rules this genuine sub-creation within God's primary creation. Mythology, to Tolkien, was not just a weapon for manipulation as it is portrayed in Dune, but a path towards objective truth in the universe. Also, the morality of Tolkien's Middle-earth is black and white. Even though some characters are tempted by evil and can sometimes fail to act in a moral way, there is still clearly objective morality within the universe of Arda, a right way and a wrong way, a light side and a dark side, a metaphysical good and a metaphysical evil. In contrast, the morality of the Dune universe is very grey and the story is very political. It has numerous characters and organisations who do despicable things in order to survive within a politically volatile system. The ruling houses are mainly interested in profit, the continuation of their houses, and the perpetuation of their genes into the next generation, and will use all types of butchery, realpolitik, and treachery in order to achieve these aims. In contrast, Tolkien's world is a world with much more grace and kindness. Tolkien's own personal heroes were Beowulf and Gawain, and this story could have been too Machiavellian and Nietzschean for his liking. Herbert's work is concerned with anti-heroes, while Tolkien is concerned with true heroism. Tolkien even quickly abandoned his own Lord of the Rings sequel called The New Shadow because he realised that it would be a story of politics and the evil of men. I did begin a story placed about 100 years after the downfall, but it proved both sinister and depressing. Since we are dealing with men, it is inevitable that we should be concerned with the most regrettable feature of their nature, their quick satiety with good, so that the people of Gondor in times of peace, justice and prosperity would become discontented and restless, while the dynasts descended from Aragorn would become just kings and governors like Denethor or worse. I found that even so early there was an outcrop of revolutionary plots about a centre of secret satanistic religion, while Gondorian boys were playing at being orcs and going around doing damage. I could have written a thriller about the plot and its discovery and overthrow, but it would have been just that, not worth doing. Even the main protagonist of the first Dune book, Paul Atreides, makes some questionable moral decisions. He and his mother, the Lady Jessica, knowingly manipulate the Fremen. The Fremen are the native people who live in the deep deserts of Arrakis. They are a futuristic society whose culture is descended from the Arabs in our world. The Fremen's religious views have been shaped by the outside influence of the Bene Gesserit's Missionaro Protectiva. They believe that their myths and legends of a prophesied messiah is organic, but in fact it's just artificial, manipulated lies. Paul and his mother knowingly take advantage of this, and Paul goes on to present himself as this religious messiah and as a living God in order to survive and to seek revenge for his family. He becomes the leader and eschatological messiah of a post-Islamist society. Paul is the embodiment of the Islamic Mahdi and wages a holy war or jihad with the barbaric Fremen by his side in order to overthrow civilization and take control of the interplanetary galactic empire, from whence the bloody jihad he foresees in his visions will spread across the known universe like wildfire, consuming all those who stand in its way. Paul even uses atomic weapons to achieve this end goal of total military victory. It's also strongly hinted throughout the novel that this supposed hero is the worst thing to happen to the people, and this is more clearly demonstrated in the second Dune book. Paul, also at the end of the story, goes on to marry the Emperor's daughter, the Princess Irulan, but not out of love, but for political power as the new Emperor, disrespecting the sacred institution. All of these decisions made by Paul would have most likely have felt repugnant to Tolkien. With all this stated, it isn't a surprise why a devout Roman Catholic would dislike such a work which focuses on realpolitik and the dark side of mankind, that overall paints Catholicism in a bad light and puts the main protagonist, this supposed hero, as a Christ-like figure leading a culture descended from Islam into a jihad against the entire universe. In many ways, Dune can be seen as what would have happened if we got the bad ending to The Lord of the Rings. Paul essentially unleashes the overwhelming potent might of the Fremen and takes full control of the most vital and powerful substance within the Dune universe, called the Spice Melange, in order to overthrow the cruel Emperor of the galaxy, but in the aftermath becomes an even more crueler Emperor. This not only damages his own soul, but also forever affects the inhabitants of the galaxy. It's like if Aragorn had used the evil power of the One Ring to destroy the Dark Lord Sauron, but in the process becomes a more evil Dark Lord himself. In conclusion, this video has investigated numerous possible reasons for why J.R.R. Tolkien most likely disliked Dune with some intensity. However, it must be said that without Tolkien here to say, it all still remains in the realm of speculation. It's quite possible Tolkien simply disliked Dune because it was too modernist, or maybe it's because it didn't have enough trees in the story, or maybe it didn't have enough sons or hobbits for his liking. Dune is a fascinating and epic story, but it isn't for everyone, and quite clearly Tolkien was among those people. It is okay for people not to personally like certain works of fiction, and remember, Tolkien never made his opinions on this issue public. This was expressed in a private letter. He isn't vicious or disrespectful in this letter. He even writes in this letter that he considers Frank Herbert to be working along the same lines as him, and also found it unfortunate that he disliked it so much. It's a very classy way to respectfully disagree with someone, and I find it commendable. For me, even though Tolkien personally disliked Dune, I still really enjoy it. However, what I get from reading The Lord of the Rings isn't the same thing I get out of reading Dune. I enjoy both stories in different ways for different reasons. Tolkien was a great writer, but he didn't own storytelling, and his opinion was nothing more than his own personal preferences. Remember, he was quite clear during his own lifetime on his views on allegory versus applicability. Put simply, he believed a story belonged to the reader, and it was not the responsibility of a writer to provide a single interpretation. At the end of the day, both Dune and The Lord of the Rings are masterpieces of world building and story. Both Herbert and Tolkien created worlds of epic proportions and vast scales that have left behind a devoted fan base. Hopefully, with the release of the upcoming cinematic Dune movie, it will be able to succeed in having the Dune saga reach a wider audience than ever before. But with it finally being given a modern retelling, It'll be a test to see if Tolkien's feelings on the book will be mirrored by new viewers. If you enjoyed this video, then please like the video and subscribe to the channel. Doing this helps to grow this channel so I can make more videos in the future. Thanks for watching everyone, and I hope all of you have a great day.